Either been here in this community most of our lives or for a long, long time, and have watched Belton grow and have seen some of the development that has occurred. And some of us, and particularly I guess Craig and I in the 50s, saw some of the things that our fathers in community leadership experienced when maybe not making some decisions as timely as might have been appropriate or helpful. Main Street, to me, I think, is one of those, and with the growth that we've experienced, we've seen there some of the things that we would wish maybe would have happened. As I know most of us have prayed about being in the position that we find ourselves in today, we are at times heartbroken because we serve two primary stakeholders. One is every one of you as an individual neighbor, friend, and family of us up here. The second is all of us collectively, friends, neighbors, and family. And there are times when we've had to pray about making decisions that are difficult for us and painful for others. And we have made the decision that if we have to vote against a friend or a family member or a neighbor on behalf of all of our friends, families, and neighbors, then we would need to be willing to do that against our own personal benefit as well. And I think most of us have made that commitment. I say that to say, I remember 16-ish years ago, the first difficult decision I faced was when a lady came up and said, "Danny Kirkley, as your second grade school teacher, I know you're not going to let them build that Bush's chicken place right next to my house on Lake Road." And praying about that at the time, I stated as I made the motion that I had to do what would benefit all of us as a community more than it might me as an individual. And so I made the motion. I remember when Luke 1:21 was so desperately, desperately needed, and we planned it and we worked at it for a number of years. And the difficulties and the inconveniences it created, but we had to do it. MLK, 9th Street, and the bridge, the same thing. We have to make very difficult decisions because we've been in the planning process for 20 years and because of the commitments and sacrifices we've made as a community. It's my opinion that we don't really have an option, that we've got to proceed with the adoption of the plan and the planning for the future that we need to have for the safety, for the travel, for looking at Main Street today and Loop 121. We're already planning expansion of Loop 121. It's not that old. It's got to happen. And so as it breaks my heart to say that to you, it's my opinion and my belief and my position that we will go ahead with this plan.
Anybody else?
Is there a actual discussion time, or we?
You can make a motion even.
Yeah, we
Well,
can.
so I'll follow up what Dan said, just mainly as a matter of record, since there's not near as many people here tonight as there were the other night. I kind of wish everybody from the other night was here tonight to hear what we have to say. But I kind of echo a lot of what Dan said. But some of this, and I might disagree with Dan a little bit even, but some of this is based on a false premise as far as the people that have come and spoken. And so when you base your whole argument, your whole opposition on a false premise to begin with, it's kind of hard to make sense of the rest of it. And that false premise is, in all the writing and all the letters and all the everything, all the correspondence, the comments, it's been said that we're wanting to put a 4-lane highway through that neighborhood. That's never been part of the plan. It's far as I'm concerned, will never be part of the plan. It's not what you discussed tonight. It's a neighborhood street, and depending on funds, depending on timing, depending on things that we can't even foresee tonight, will determine the scale of that street. It'll determine whether it goes just from 439 to Sparta to relieve some pressure there, or it depends on whether we'll be able to build a bridge to go over everything we're going to have to go over to connect it to 190 or 14. So there's so much unknown, but at the very least, I think it's conceivable that there's going to be some sort of street through there, not a highway, but a street that's going to alleviate a lot of pressure. And that's not even finished being built out. There's more coming. So, I mean, it's almost finished, but there's more coming. And so, you know, kind of answering to some of the comments, you know, it's not a 150 to 200 foot wide highway. It's a 150 to 200 foot right of way that we could put a 20-foot street in if we wanted to. I mean, that's not code. I think it's 37. But, I mean, 37-foot street or even a 40-foot street and a 200-foot right-of-way is not anywhere close to a highway. So I wanted to make that point because it's very important, because I think, you know, I know emotions get involved, and to what Dan was saying, I mean, I've got to think about how I would feel if I was a house that backed up to that. And so I understand the emotion, but I just want to bring it back to facts and not emotion, because we make our decisions on facts and try to keep emotion out of it, to Dan's point. There was another thing that there's this thought that somehow the city's kept this secret or somehow not informed people. That's another complete false statement. We've had meeting after meeting. I mean, I know John did some research, but I didn't do the research to see exactly how many times we've discussed this over the last 20 years, or how many times it's been in the newspaper over the last 20 years. But there's no secret about this right-of-way and about the potential for a lake-to-lake road. It's well publicized. There's no reason to hide it. It's a big green space going through a development. And then that brings me to another point, is that we've been very involved in this whole process the whole time that housing development has been being built. I mean, it's been platted through us. It's been laid out through the council, whether it's this council or a council before. We've been very involved in the whole process of that entire housing neighborhood with the lake-to-lake road as part of that plan. So it's not that we thought we want a lake-to-lake road before all these houses are here, and then we just stepped back and didn't have anything to do with the houses being built, and now that they're built, it's not a good idea. We've been planning this. This has been part of the strategic plan, the thoroughfare plan, the development plan of that whole neighborhood was this street in some form. Again, not a highway. So those are just some points I wanted to clarify in fact, not emotion, because it's important, because I think there's a lot of people in that neighborhood, maybe even in the room, I don't know, that are basing their comments and their thoughts and their opinions on these statements that are not true. So, I mean, if you came to me and I lived in that neighborhood and said, I'm going to put a 4-lane highway in your backyard, I would be violently opposed to that. But that's not what's happening. So I just want to make sure, for the record, in public, to clarify that fact. That's the single most important thing, I think, in this whole conversation, is that it is not a highway. And I don't think anybody up here would vote to have a highway. It's not an Adams. It's not a Rancier. There's no business. There's no commercial. There's no retail. It's a street, a neighborhood street, and depending on funding, depending on everything else, like I said, determines how big, how many lanes. But whatever is in there, whether it's 4 lanes with a divided median, with landscaping, hike and bike trails, whatever it is going to be nice and is going to be complementary to that neighborhood. And it's not going to be a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit. It's probably going to be 40 or 45 at the most. So again, not a highway. So I just want to make those comments to just kind of clarify some things that we've heard and listened to and have seen in writing.
Okay.
Well, again, I want to thank you guys and helping me remind me with your signs. There was some comments about we need to go walk this place. I've walked all of that. I've been part of that. There's comments about where we sit and the decisions we make. And I live on Loop 121, and I'm going to have part of my property is going to be taken for the greater good, right? For the greater good of the community. And I would say I learned a lot from a guy, Joe Baisden, was here when we had to vote on some alcohol thing. And he was at the time either pastor or just retired as pastor of Church of Christ. And he voted for it. And he said when he voted for that thing with the alcohol, he says, I've been a member of Church of Christ, and you know that we're against that. And I personally, I don't think that that's best. He said, but I would be a hypocrite to sit here and stand against it when I go to Chili's and they got a bar in there, and I'm supporting a restaurant that has a bar. So I would be a hypocrite. And the reality is we all drive up and down I-35, and everybody sitting here drives up and down Loop 121. And every car that goes up and down Loop 121 makes a negative impact on our environment and makes a negative impact on the people that are next to it, but maybe to the greater good. And again, if you'd like to listen to if any of you guys like to listen to really deep podcasts, there's a guy named Jordan Peterson, and he has a lot of them. One of them is myth, science, religion, and truth. And he basically says, what is truth? What is truth? And what we've heard is different people stating things about this Lake to Lake Road that are all different. Well, which one's true? How do we discern which one's true? Well, the truth is what you observe, right? What do you observe? What you observe is truth. And we realize that what we observe sometimes is bigger than a tree or a road or a personality. Truth maybe transcends a little bit, but still ultimately what you observe. And I'll finish it with this, that when growing up in this community, there was not an Oak Village. Was it Oak Village? There were Salgados and Sol de Jalisco. Was that Oak Village? There wasn't an Oak Village. It was a piece of property with cows and horses. And we were in a little subdivision on Montrose that backed up to it. And that was about as far north as you got. That was Belton. And the fact is, the truth is, the Belton grew. That's not Belton. And Walmart was there, and H-E-B was downtown, not across where Tyler is. Tyler's not there. H-E-B's not there. It's Planet Fitness now, right? Yeah. So that's been Tyler Elementary, and that's the reality. Is cities existed before my this city existed before my grandparents were born, before my great-grandparents were born. And it will exist after my grandchildren are dead. And so we are in a small time stewards. We are stewards of God's creation. We're stewards of this city. And as stewards, we have to look at it from a bigger perspective. And we have to be good stewards. Somebody mentioned that it would be great if Lake Road, if we're going to do something, we need to make a highway from Main Street on Lake Road over to I-35. And I agree with that. But to do that, we would have to condemn probably 20 homes, move them out of their homes, tear them down, purchase them at high cost to the citizens of Belton to be able to do that. And we would be able to get it to Leon River. And then we would hope and pray that Temple would see the need for Belton citizens to get through Temple and allow for Belton to grow, which is not necessarily in their financial best interest to pay for a road for Belton. So we rely on things like K-Tempo and those others to look at regional plans. So, if the city forefathers would have planned a long time ago, well, it would have been nice to have a corridor from Lake Road at 317 where no houses were allowed to be built. So sometime in 40, 50, 70 years, maybe a road could go in. So it's our job, our plan is that we need to look at this thing in 50 to 60 years and acquire the right of way. at the lowest cost to the citizens and the lowest impact to the community to help protect children and to protect Belton homes. That's why we're doing it, is to protect those. And to protect those not just today, but in 20 years, 50 years, and in 100 years, to protect all of that. And that's what we're here. And so what we do is we're going to allow for future councils, because by the time we raise enough money to make a local collector or something like Sparta Road that could go through that area, before that ever happens, most of us will probably not be on council, and the city manager will probably not be here, and most of the staff will probably not be here, and it'll be somebody else's future decision. If they decide to build a road, they can, because they have the freedom and they can do it. If they decide not to build a road, they can choose that too. And that's okay. We will provide that path for them. I've got some friends right now in Poison Oak that there's about 13 homes that have been condemned by Temple that they're going to tear down because they need to widen Poison Oak Road. Why did they do that? Why are they having to tear those people's houses down? That's just wrong. Well, because the road has to be widened, because people came. The observed truth is that there are too many people, and that we have to have a road that's safe for school buses to go down, because the school district bought property and they're putting a school there. And so Temple is having to work with them. And it's a different jurisdiction. The city and the school are two governing bodies. And so Temple is being responsible to protect the children. And protecting the children actually trumps protecting those 13 homes. And that's a tough, I don't want to be in that spot. So I'm glad that we have this. And I'm willing to talk to each and every one of you individually. We'll listen to this podcast together and we'll define what truth is. And maybe it's your version, maybe it's my version. But I'm here to observe and to use some level of wisdom and I appreciate Sam. We've changed the verbiage. We've changed the focus. The focus here, number one, is to make sure we secure right-of-way for future roads, not just this one, for any of them, before somebody puts a house in the middle of it and we put them in awkward. So we're here to secure the right-of-way, to work with our partners, which means our community citizens, which means you guys, to work with you guys to accomplish whatever those plans are. And plan is like the number 0. It's an imaginary thing. It's not a real observed thing. A plan is something that we think might happen in the future, but 9 times out of 10, we think wrong. It's an imaginary thing. So we're here talking about an imaginary thing that hopefully will benefit the future and not hurt the present. And if we really want to talk about protection, we had a really good friend of ours, Kenny Bear, that passed away this week. Because he's walking across 13th Street where there are no sidewalks. Right?
There's one side.
There's not. And there's not a controlled intersection. And we had good citizens that stopped to let him across. And somebody didn't see him.